the privilege of calling Minister Chabane to tell him that I was his new DG.
Baloyi.
I mean, Minister Baloyi.
Yes.
That I was his new DG. Minister Baloyi was equally shocked because he had not had the chance to speak to anybody about it.
Well, that's the angle I was trying to explore, because it seemed to me that the announcement of your removal happened before the time that you and Mr. Chabane were expecting it to happen because of the pressure from the media.
That's correct.
And I was wondering whether in making that announcement at the cabinet, actually there had been communication with the minister of the department to which you were going. So it seems that, from what you are saying, it seems that Minister Baloyi may not have known that he was going to get a new DG.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So the cabinet meeting concluded, an announcement is made, and I immediately moved over to the Department of Public Service and Administration.
Chair, there are two last issues that I'd like to converse with Mr. Maseko. I can do them now. I'm sure I should be able to conclude them in 10 minutes.
I think you may go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, Chair, all of the concerns that you've raised with Mr. Maseko relate to the legal requirements of how a Director General, at the level of his employment, would lawfully be transferred from one department to another. The number of legal requirements, I'm not going to bother you with them because I have been asked to assure you that Ms. Hofmeyr will deal with them quite properly, timely, and contextually when Ms. Williams testify before you. But insofar as Mr. Maseko is concerned, I'd like to raise a number of matters that might well reflect on those legal processes, because ultimately we would suggest to you that they reflect how the wish and the will of Mr. A.J. Gupta was effectively executed without regard to those legal processes. Mr. Maseko, you've told the chairperson how the announcement relating to your removal from GCIS to DPSA took place. First question, were you consulted about that removal?
Chairperson, I was not consulted about that specific removal to DPSA.
Yes. Are you aware that insofar as the legal processes are concerned, you were entitled to make representations whether or not the removal or transfer should take place?
I was still on contract. If we were dealing with a normal situation, I would have had to be consulted and asked if I agreed or even given an option to consider other options within the public service, but that did not happen. And for that reason, Chairperson, I think that it's prudent for me to say that my minister at the time was bending over backwards, may have broken a rule or two, but his intentions were noble indeed. Because he knew that if there was any lapse of time, I would have been deemed to have been out of the public service, and a transfer would have been much more complex. It would have led to a legal dispute which he thought was not warranted, and that's why he did what he did when he did it.
As far as you're concerned, are you aware whether any consultation took place between the two ministers, that is, the late Minister Chabane and Minister Baloyi?
Unfortunately, Chairperson, I can confirm that there was no such discussion, because when I found Minister Richard Baloyi to inform him that I'd already made the announcement that was his DG, he expressed shock in my first meeting, because I was calling him to say, when can we meet? I'm your new DG. He expressed shock and irritation that he was never consulted. A lot of it had to do with the fact that he was not at the meeting. I can also confirm that there was a very good working relationship between Minister Chabane and Minister Baloyi, and that could be the reason why Minister Chabane thought he could take such a risk and then have a conversation later with Minister Baloyi. But as far as I know, based on the conversation I had with both ministers, there was never consultation between the two of them prior to the announcement.
Other than the announcement in cabinet, other than the media reports about the shift and changes in your status, did you receive any official communication confirming that you have now been removed from GCIS and you are now the new Director General of DPSA?
None of that happened. I never got a formal letter formally transferring me to DPSA.
What happened after you got to DPSA with Minister Baloyi, who, remember, you said he was shocked about your installation as the new DG of his ministry?
The relationship, Chairperson, the working relationship got off on a very bad note, because the minister, as I said, was not consulted and was not impressed with it. It took a few days for me to secure a meeting with him. Eventually, we did meet. And I said, look, I'm going to try and do my best to support you and work in this department. But he clearly stated that things were under control in the department. He introduced me to the various deputies. But the situation became very unpleasant. I think that the first 3 months, we did not have or manage to have regular meetings. This is Minister Baloyi.
I'm sorry, did you say very unpleasant?
Very unpleasant.
Okay.
Because he felt he did not have a choice in who was his DG. But I stayed on for about 3 months. It became very clear that he had continued, because he had not had a properly appointed DG at the time. He continued to work with the Deputy Directors Generals, what we call DDGs, in government speak. And I just felt I was not needed in this place. We then started the conversation. I said, look, Minister, this is how things are happening. One classical example would be that at that time, there were serious negotiations taking place between government and the unions about salary increments. And all those discussions were taking place in the building, and I was not invited to those meetings. So it became very clear to me that I did not have a role to play in the department. So I said, Minister, I think we should talk about my exit from the public service, because I feel I'm earning a salary, but I'm not doing any work. So he said, okay, he'll speak to the president and they will make a plan. In the meantime, that is then, I don't need to come to the office every day. I can stay at home, but he'll make sure that the negotiations with the president are expedited. A few weeks later, he came back with a letter and an offer saying that the president had agreed to the terms of the offer. And that's how we concluded the relationship. I was given the offer and I exited the public service. We can get the date. I think it must be around July. I've got it somewhere in this pack.
Yeah, you do give a date in your statement.
I think counsel for Mr. Maseko is trying to assist you.
What page?
Chair, this is at page 2 of his CV. That is page 2 of Exhibit E1.
Oh yeah, it's July 2011.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, the last chapter of your experience with GCIS that I'd like to briefly explore in conclusion is do you know who was your successor?
Chairperson, the issue of my successor was part of the announcement at the cabinet meeting. At the time, it was announced as Mr. Jimmy Manye. I believe his name is now Mzwanele Manye. But that was announced at the cabinet meeting.
Yes. The point is, did you meet him in order to hand over your responsibilities in GCIS to him?
Unfortunately, no, Chairperson. There was no formal handover because the way the decision was explained and implemented was that the decision was effective immediately. So I never had the opportunity to hand over to him. I never even had the opportunity to pack my office. That's how urgent the move had to be, because my office told me that there was already an issue literally the next day after the cabinet meeting about parking. They needed to know if they needed to give him access to the parking, to my parking bay in the building. So I had to be out of the place, so there was no time to
Mr.
hand
Maseko,
over.
we were not there, and it's important that you should try and give us a picture of what happened. Did you have any occasion to go and bid farewell to your staff members?
That sounds a bit familiar. Chairperson, I never had the chance to say goodbye to my staff. I think that the last time they saw me was when I had finalized the statement for the cabinet meeting and had to exit the building. So I never got a chance to say goodbye to my deputies, my staff. Although my staff did try, I must give them a bit of credit. They did try to organize a farewell party. I think I may have declined it, but I think they did try.
Chairperson, that is the story of Mr. Maseko relating to GCIS. I don't think I have any further questions to put to him, but I would ask your permission to confer with my colleagues in case I missed something in my enthusiasm.
Yes, you may do so. I do want to ask Mr. Maseko a question or two as well. At the time that Minister Chabane told you that former President Zuma had told him or instructed him to redeploy you or terminate your services, how long had you been in government service?
All in all, Chair, I would estimate that I'd spent 17 years or so in the public service, in different capacities, in different departments.
Does that exclude or include the time you spent as a member of parliament?
I do include.
Okay, all right. Let's exclude the years you spent as a member of parliament and count just those years when you were attached to a government department or another. Would that be easy to do?
We can work it out. the last time I checked, I think it must have been something like, it's between 15 and 17 years. It covers from being Director General of Public Works, short stint with the Department of Public Service and Administration. It covers a very long stint as Superintendent General, which is Head of Education, Gauteng Department of Education.
And GCIS,
And
of
then
course.
there's, of course, GCIS, yes.
And,
So
and
we
how,
can work it out.
and how long had you been at GCIS at the time Minister Chabane told you this?
I had been there from 2008 to 2011.
Would that be about 5 years, 4 years, 5 years? More or less?
About 3 years.
About 3.
Yeah.
Oh,
And what makes that question even more important, Chairperson, is that at the time when the contract was being redetermined, or at the time when I was moved from GCIS, there were only a few months left in the contract.
Well, I was going to come to that
okay,
to say,
no,
yeah.
apologies,
No,
yes.
no, but it's good to say how much more time of your contract was still left when you actually got told by Minister Chabane that President Zuma wanted you to be redeployed or your services to be terminated. You say it was about 3 months?
I think it was longer, Chair. It probably was...
Less than a year.
Less than a year, certainly. I think we calculated the other day, it came to around 7 months.
Yeah.
But we've been trying to, with your team of investigators, trying to get a copy of the contract because
Okay.
it's so
Yes.
long ago. But I'm not sure if we're getting enough cooperation from the DPSA to get a copy of the contract.
Okay, no, that's fine. Well, if there are difficulties, I'm sure the Commission's legal team would let me know if there is no cooperation coming forward. So, during the time that you were at GCIS, did you, throughout those years, occupy one position only?
Yes, Chairperson, one position, CEO
Yeah.
and
Yes.
government spokesperson.
Yes. During that time, or let me rephrase that, do directors general get their performance assessed from time to time by the ministers or whoever to see if they are doing well or not doing well?
The Directors General assessed on an annual basis
Yes.
by the minister who's normally assisted by other ministers. So it will be a
Yes.
panel of 3 people.
Yes.
And they may invite another DG from another department. So
Yes.
there is a process for
Yes.
assessment.
Yes.
I can't confirm that it happens in all the departments all the
Yes.
time, but that's the process.
Yes. Now, from what you have told us, Minister Chabane wasn't convinced that the decision that you should be removed from GCIS was correct or fair, because you say he said he knew that you had done nothing wrong.
He put it in very clear words to say he did not agree with the decision,
Yes.
but he was simply complying with an instruction
Yes.
from his boss.
And he being basically your supervisor, he would be one person that would be that would know your performance as DG of GCIS or the position you were holding, as to how you had been performing.
Without a doubt, sir, he would be the person.
During that time, or let me first ask this question, During your time at GCIS, was Minister Chabane always your minister, or had there been somebody else at some stage earlier who was your minister?
Apologies. I had a total set of 3 ministers during my tenure.
Yes.
The first one was Minister Esop Pahad. Then there was Collins Chabane. The third one was Ms. Manto Shabalala Msimang.
Okay. During Minister Chabane was your minister from when to when, if you are able to remember, or for more or less how long, if you are able to remember, out of those 3 years or so?
I can work it out. I don't have the dates
Yes.
offhand.
But do you know whether he was your minister the longest compared to the other 2 or not?
I think the longest would have been with Minister Esop Pahad, the first minister.
Yes, the first
I
minister.
reported to.
Yes.
The one with Minister Collins Chabane was short. And the least number of months, I think, would have been with Minister Manto Shabalala Msimang.
Yes. Now, if there is a performance problem on the part of a person occupying the position of Director General, such as you occupied, what would normally happen? I assume that he would be, or he or she would be informed about areas of concern in his or her performance. Is that the position, or is that not?
The position in government, and I presume in the public-private sector as well, is that if there are issues of performance, the minister or CEO in charge cannot just sit in their office and decide that this person is not performing without following due process and terminate. So in government, the way it works is that there would have had to be a process, and if the process finds that the DG is not performing, a report will then be given to the president with a recommendation from the minister to say, this person is not performing, and I recommend that they be removed from their position. Unfortunately, the period that your commission chairperson is dealing with, there are a lot of directors general's contracts that were terminated. I would say less than 5% of those terminations had to do with performance. The bulk of those dismissals had to do with either differences of personalities or a new minister being appointed and feeling that they want their own person to be appointed. And as a result, the public services suffered a huge brain drain over the past, I would say, 2 decades. Because very capable directors general, and I'm not including myself, very capable directors general have left the service, are in the private sector now, and the public service would have been in a better position if we had retained those skills since 1994. I think we'll be stronger. There have been less instances of poor service delivery that we're experiencing in the country at this stage. Short answer to your question, process would have been a minister recommends to the president that person A is not performing, and then a decision is then taken that the contract needs to be ended, and then there will be formal discussions, either disciplinary process or whatever, but there will be a formal process.
And at that time, the contract between a director general, would it have been, would a contract of employment involving a director general, would it have been between that person and the minister, or would it have been between that person and the president?
The process, if I may beg your intelligence, just to explain, Chairperson, the initial process was, it was a contract purely between the Director General and the Minister. They would sign. if there's termination, it's just between the two of them. President gets informed. But there was a time, I think 10 years into our democracy, problems were starting to emerge between ministers and their directors general. And there was a view, a feeling within government that we needed to get a third party to mediate this relationship because a lot of DGs were being fired. I would imagine some for good reasons, others could be that a DG did not agree to the signing of a particular contract and therefore they get terminated. So the view was that let that be a contract between the minister and the DG, but with the concurrence of the president, so that the minister knows that if they want to terminate, the president has to be in the picture. But in my time in the public service, I don't recall a decision being taken by the president to say this DG is fired without the involvement of the minister in that process, to make sure there's understanding of the reasons, agreement on the process, etc., etc.
And in particular, your contract of employment, was it with your minister?
The signed contract in all cases would be between DG and the minister.
Yes.
So in mine, it was contract with the minister. And the minister who would have signed it would have been Minister Esop Bahad because Minister Chabane found me in the post.
So in your case, your contract was with Minister Chabane, even though it would have been signed a few years earlier by Minister Esop Bahad, but Minister Chabane would simply have stepped into the shoes of whoever had been the minister before him.
That's correct, sir.
And you say Minister Chabane simply made it clear he did not agree with the decision that you should be removed from GCIS.
I can confirm that, Chair.
And during your time at GCIS, was there ever any complaint by any of your seniors, if I can call them that, about your performance?
Not even once, Chairperson.
Nobody ever raised any issue with you about your performance at GCIS?
No, nobody raised it with me.
Yes. And
I might just add that there would be cases where, as the communication arm, we issue a statement and the minister would be unhappy with that statement and
but
saying we
nothing
should.
Really,
but other than that, there was never a performance issue raised.
Yes. And in terms of misconduct, you were never called to any disciplinary process because of any allegations of misconduct at GCIS?
Chairperson, at GCIS or in any of the departments where I worked, and if there's a file that says disciplinary action against me, that file is probably empty still today.
Yes. So the picture that you have conveyed to us is therefore that as far as you are concerned, nobody had any dissatisfaction with your performance in terms of your seniors, as you said. And then you were told that the former president had said to your minister, your services must be terminated or you must be redeployed. And your minister made it clear to you he didn't agree with this, but he had to comply. And that is effectively what happened.
That's correct, sir.
Am I right to think that from what you have said, namely that Minister Chabane said to you, the president said he must either redeploy you or terminate your services. Am I right to think that this must mean that the former president may not have minded you continuing in government, in some government department, but he did not want you to continue as head of GCIS?
as Chairperson, as it was communicated to me by Minister Collins Chabane, he said, the President said, by the time he arrives back into the country, I should not be the head of GCIS. It was
Yes.
as specific as that.
Yes.
It might be Minister Chabane's own interpretation to say, if he didn't want me in GCIS,
Yes.
he wouldn't mind me elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's how Minister Chabane could have interpreted the instruction.
But if that was his interpretation, it probably was correct, because he announced at cabinet that you were the new DG for another department, and you haven't told us that there was any complaint from the former president or anybody that you were still within government.
That's correct, sir. When the announcement was made, there was a surprise in the meeting, but
Yeah.
no complaint from anybody about my going to DPSA.
So it may be that the problem was you being head of GCIS.
It is easy to come to that conclusion, and that's the only conclusion I came to.
Yes. No, thank you. Mr. Malega, you had wished to consult with your colleagues.
Yes, Chair. I see that we have gone past tea time. Is it
Yes.
convenient to get back to tea time and resume?
Okay, all right.
There are some announcements that Mr. Pretorius may want to make.
Well, if there won't be any further questions for Mr. Maseko, would it not be convenient that we deal with those announcements, and then, because if we are going to be adjourning,
Yes.
but if there will be some questions for him or some other business other than announcements, then maybe we can adjourn and come
Chair, I
back.
don't have further questions to Mr. Maseko.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, well, maybe, but you would rather ask that we adjourn and come back.
Yes, because my colleagues may
have
some
okay.
some issues that.
Okay, no, that's all right. We will. Well, before that, Mr. Maseko, there will not be questions for you now. We contemplate that Mr. Maseko would come back some other time, isn't it?
Yes, Chair, for cross-examination to the
Yeah.
extent you allow it.
Yes. So we can excuse him for now, and arrangements will be made for him to come back at some stage in the future. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Maseko, for coming. You will be excused for now, but the Commission's legal team will be in touch with you or with your attorney and counsel to arrange for when you can come back again.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. We'll take the short adjournment now and resume at 5 to 12.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
a.m. tomorrow, Ms. Williams, the Acting Director General of GCIS, will testify. She will be led by Advocate Hofmeyr. I'm informed that a bundle of the relevant documentation will be forwarded to your office this afternoon. And then at 3 p.m., Doctors Hellman and Kaufman, international experts on the concept of state capture, will be testifying by video conference. Again, I'm informed that a bundle of relevant documentation will be delivered to your office today.
Okay.
So may we adjourn then?
Thank you very much. That is what will happen. We adjourn then until tomorrow, 10 o'clock. We adjourn.